Wouldn't it be nice to have a time where we can have a new beginning? I'll explain on today's program.
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
In case you didn't know, this weekend starts a new beginning for the church anyway. It's called the Season of Advent, those 4 Sundays prior to the celebration of Christmas. It's a time where we should take stock in the year behind us, look forward to Christmas, the beginning of a new church year, and in the Western world, the beginning of a new calendar year as well. Today on the program, I want to start out by just looking at some news stories and just add some thoughts and comments along the way. I've been watching the news a good chunk of my life, and I can honestly say in all my years, and I'm retired now, so I've turned into that old guy I swore I never would become. I see things in the news today that would have been unthinkable when I first started out in my working career, even in radio. I never thought I would hear terms like transgender being mainstreamed. I mean, literally mainstreamed. Yet I have some stories in front of me about it. Personally, I believe that much of transgenderism is one of two things. Trying to be, shall we say, accepted in a strange society for some, and a mental illness for others. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. When I look at the director of health in the state of Pennsylvania, who is claiming to be a woman, it is a man who looks like a man with long blondish hair, who sounds like a man, but this man believes he is a woman. I can understand those really rare times in history where, for lack of a better term, there is a, shall we say, biological error. But in many cases today, these are physically normal human beings, male or female, that for whatever reason decide they want to be the other gender. If they're a man, they want to be a woman, and some women decide they want to be men. But it seems mostly, from what I'm observing, it's more men wanting to become women, which makes me wonder. What has happened in our society, what has happened in our culture to make this concept all of a sudden acceptable and normalized? Some people may say I've got some pretty strong opinions, and I do. I've seen what happens with this kind of destruction in families and in people and in individuals. Transgenderism has been considered for a long time by psychologists and psychiatrists to be an abnormal behavior, to be something wrong, like any other mental disorder like schizophrenia. But instead of treating it, now we celebrate it. And if you don't buy into it, well, you can be deplatformed by YouTube. You can be ostracized on Facebook. You can have your account obliterated by the tech tyrant over there at Twitter. Our conversation is being increasingly controlled. Just look at the last year, the last 3 years, the last 5 years here in the United States and in Canada and in many other parts of the Western world. Certain news stories, certain legitimate, factually based news stories were literally tossed aside, dismissed, and suppressed by Facebook and Twitter because they have a political agenda. And the worst part is Twitter and Facebook and Google, all the tech tyrants, are living under this special protection that came out in the 1990s, where they're neither a publisher nor are they a platform. And back when that law was written, way back in the 1990s, this is before most people had a computer in their home. This is when most people, if they were on the internet, used dial-up. Remember dial-up, slow internet? Your first, 2400 baud. My first modem was 1200 baud. Then I got a 2400. Then eventually, 4800. And, then from that point, it got as high as theoretically 56K. Which means a website like the one I use for Truth to Ponder would take a long time to load. Early in the 1990s, to protect this fledgling industry, computers and online. And what you had was some of these what are called bulletin board sites where people could make postings and comments, and the fear was these little entrepreneurs with very little money could be sued if somebody said something wrong and they didn't, take care of getting rid of it. So the fledgling computer industry was given these special exemptions, where they could operate both as a platform and, in essence, as a publisher and not face any particular scrutiny. Now, I can think of a lot of those bulletin board sites, the BBS is what they called them back in the day. And you may have a couple of hundred users. There's no real money involved in this. No one's making anything. So if somebody was to get sued for, let's say, $5,000, it could throw them offline, be the end of it. And so special consideration was made to assist the fledgling and the beginnings of the computer age. By the time we got past the year 2004, 2005, increasingly because of DSL and the cable companies and competition, more and more people got online and at higher speeds. Online banking, all these things started coming of age very quickly. And it's in that light that companies like MySpace and others got started. Some made it, some failed. I can remember when Yahoo was a big deal. It's a fraction of what it was because things change over time. Hard to believe that it's been just a little over 10 years since a little startup company called Facebook came along. And one by one, Facebook's siren call for all of us to be online was, hey, a wonderful place to gather with your family and your friends and reconnect with people you haven't talked to since high school or college or childhood. And you can share to your heart's content whatever's on your mind with your friends, your family, and the world at large. It seemed like a great idea. I can remember working in emergency management back then and getting for our division and also for the sheriff's office in our county their first Facebook pages. And it was a big risk back then because you never knew what somebody might say. But it's worth sometimes taking those risks like we did. All the way up until 2015, I never felt that something I would post would be considered violating some kind of obscure, non-identifiable community standard. But some people, starting in 2016, occasionally would catch the attention of somebody at Facebook. And what you posted may quietly be shadow banned, deleted. You might even get warned about what your content is. And look at the other tech tyrant company, Google. They own YouTube. They also own Blogger. And if you somehow violate their obscure, unidentifiable community standards, well, you may find that post gone. You may be suspended for a week or a month or banished for good. This year, and I noticed this prior to the pandemic, it seemed that Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube were increasingly and daily taking a harder line against certain kinds of speech. You can say, well, Bob, isn't that hate speech they're getting rid of? It depends on your definition of hate. To some people, truth is hate speech. They don't want to know the truth. They have an agenda. It is now estimated that probably 6 million or more votes in the United States were directly changed because of the influence of the tech tyrants, which means, in my opinion, they were aiding a candidate and should be subject to Federal Election Commission laws. But they hide behind their special status given 25 years ago. And in my opinion, it is time for all of those special protections to go away. These are not little ma and pa bulletin board sites with 50 to 100 or 200 users. These are sites that are worth billions upon billions of dollars with literally billions of users around the world. Stop and think for just one moment. Billions with a B users. And the influence that these Silicon Valley companies have over the world is absolutely enormous. You put something, and I've done it before. I've posted some very truthful things, and I've had my postings taken down. I have been suspended for a day or two or three for things that have to do with this radio show, because it doesn't fit their community standard. And try to find out what that community standard is. Ask a question. You will never get an answer because there isn't one. They make up their community standard as they go along. Whatever suits the purpose for the moment. These tech tyrants are now billionaires with a B. And they feel that they have the authority given to them to tell the world how they should think and how they should act. They are dictatorial in all that they do. And increasingly, I'm finding websites and trustworthy people that I'm aware of getting deplatformed because they believe in something like transgenderism is not a natural construct. It is actually some kind of a deviation or an illness. That in and of itself can get you banned in a lot of places because we have to have this normative. How many of you that are parents or grandparents, especially if you're a grandparent, you're my age, do you think that some child at the age of 4 or 8 or 10 can thoroughly grasp the concept of his or her gender and sexuality? I don't think so. Yet we're told we have to believe that a child at the age of 4 or 5 knows that I'm a boy, that I really need to be a girl. And we've seen that play out in courts, and it's like, are these people crazy? An impressionable boy with a deranged mother suddenly dressing her boy up like a girl because, honestly, she wanted a daughter, and she's divorced, is trying to fight for the right to chemically alter the child at a young age to suppress puberty and transform him physically from a young boy into allegedly a young woman. I think it's her mental illness, not the child's, in this case. There's so much happening in this world today. And for me, at times, it's hard to keep up with. Hopefully next week, I've got a couple of guests lined up on the regular weekday program that airs on a number of stations domestically in the United States and on shortwave. But I want to get into some of these topics. But for my audience here on this weekend show, for this first half of the program anyway, I wanted to share some things in the news that I'm finding and just add some comments. So, by the way, I had a question from a listener to this program who just asked me in short terms, what do I think of the election? And my response is, I think the election, this go-round, was one of the greatest frauds perpetuated upon the United States of America since our founding. And how do I know that? I've been around long enough. I've observed how things work in elections. And in certain states, including where we have a part-time home in Georgia, it defied all logic. When you have this opportunity of cheating, let me give you an idea of what's going on in Georgia right now. If you may know this already. A record number of people requesting mail-in ballots for the runoff elections in January for the 2 United States Senator seats from the state of Georgia. We're going to have hundreds of millions of dollars poured into this state for advertising. Thankfully, I don't listen to regular TV stations in Georgia. Ironically, here in the mountains, I can't get them. Maybe I'm blessed. And I'm also in a place where local radio is hard to get as well. So I rely on other sources. Otherwise, I'd be buried alive in political advertising between now and January 5th. We already know something from this election that just passed in Georgia. They started analyzing some of the requests for mail-in ballots and absentee ballots. And they're finding many of these absentee ballots, the address that looked like a residential address was like a mailing service, like the UPS store, or a business address. In other words, they were not legitimate addresses, and addresses getting repeated. Names literally fictitious. One of the greatest fears they have here in the state of Georgia, you actually have one of the tech tyrants who ran for president under the Democrat Party, didn't make it very far, last name is Yang. He wants people to move to Georgia for a few days, register to vote, get your absentee ballot, and go back home. Hopefully, under Georgia law, that's a felony. And it's my prayer and it's my hope that if somebody from California decides to come to Georgia to rig an election, if they're found out, they get to stay in Georgia for a few years in a prison. I would never think of flying to California and lying that I'm a resident to vote in California or vote in New York or vote in Maryland or any other state. My wife and I, we live in 2 states, but we're only a resident of one. That's Florida. Sure, I'd love to be able to vote legally in the 2 states because we own property in this one county. And yeah, I'd like to have a say-so, but this is the part-time house. Though this year it's going to be used a little bit more because of some family, to help some family members. But I can only vote in one state. I have to choose. I can't lie and run off. I mean, I could real easily, with a Georgia address, I bet I could apply for a mail-in ballot and get one. As a matter of fact, in our mailbox this week here in Georgia, was from some political action committee wanting to know why people at this address had not registered to vote. And it had all the paperwork included. Just mail it in a prepaid envelope, and you too would be registered to vote. I could have taken that piece of paper, and I could have filled my name out on that piece of paper. I could have lied, and I would have had a ballot, and it would have been counted, most likely, here in the county in which we live, in a Senate race. But it is both illegal and morally wrong. But see, the other side that wants to have people come to Georgia to vote has no moral standing, no moral character. To even suggest something shows an intellectual, spiritual, and moral bankruptcy beyond words. But these tech giants have proven they have no moral backbone at all. Zero. None. I don't care what part of the world you live in. And I've said this before, and I'm going to say this again and again and again until this message is understood. This is a critical message to understand. I know a lot of clergy in various church groups and denominations, not just mine, but others, people that I know and respect, like, get along with. They talk about their presence on YouTube and Facebook. Well, fine, use it. But don't put all your eggs in the Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter basket. You'll be sorry that you did. Because one day you're going to say something that somebody's not going to like. And they're going to flag you for being, a homophobe or this-ophobe or that-ophobe. And somebody in Silicon Valley will take a quick look at what you posted and tell you in no uncertain terms you have violated a community standard. If it's YouTube, you might even get your first strike. You get 3 strikes, you're banished for good. They just get rid of you. Some, they don't even give you 3 strikes. They just get rid of you because they want to get rid of you. There are businesses that took that invitation from the YouTubes, took that invitation from the Facebooks and everything else, and they have built their life, their ministry, their work on those platforms. And by the way, those platforms are making lots of money. Let's get something really clear here. For those that say, well, they're a private company. Well, that's right, they are. But they're operating under very special protection laws that were given to companies to protect their interest in the early days of the internet. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube need to make a hard and fast decision. And the law needs to change in the United States immediately, as fast as possible, to expedite this process. I don't think anybody in 1994 envisioned a monster like Amazon, a monster like Facebook, a monster like Twitter, a monster like YouTube being up and running. I don't think anybody could have ever conceived of such a notion. It wasn't in the cards. It just wasn't there. But our technology doubled, our ability and our high-speed internet. It's global in most areas. Now, I know part of where my show is heard, it's terrible internet. I get it. In time, maybe the whole world will be blanketed. Time will tell. Wouldn't surprise me. But the protection that was given these tech tyrants and tech monsters has got to come to an end. They must decide, are they a publisher or a forum? They cannot be both at the same time and then be exempt from all the rules. If I am a publisher and I put something out as a publisher and it is wrong, it's a lie, or it's slander, or it's libel, whatever the case may be, I can be held accountable if I willfully do something of that nature in a court of law. As a publisher, I made an editorial decision. And if that decision is untruthful, or an attack or a smear that's unwarranted, well, guess what? Guess what? I can be sued. I mean, CNN, NBC, and others, and the Washington Post figured that out too, the hard way, in a case from a few years back. The high school student from Kentucky, who they tried to make out as some kind of a racist because he wore a Make America Great hat. He came from a Catholic high school. They were at a pro-life rally in D.C., and the media tried to make him out for something he never was. It made it look like he was starting an issue with somebody else when the whole story was 100% in reverse. In his case, a renowned lawyer got involved and filed massive lawsuits against those entities. 2 have already settled as far as I can remember, and I think the other ones will probably follow suit. It is probably at minimum a 7-figure settlement for every one of them, maybe more. But see, YouTube, they don't face that. Facebook doesn't face that. Twitter, exempt. They need to decide if they're going to be a publisher. If I put something up there and they want to edit it or they want to change it, then they need to be held responsible for suppressing something if they're a publisher, if they're keeping truth out of people's hands. Or they can be what they claim to be, and they use this community standards nonsense to protect them. I can understand, based upon Supreme Court rulings, certain things that cannot be said. I get it. There are certain things that are not considered fully protected. But outside of that, if my opinion about a certain candidate is negative for my reasons, don't suppress me for saying what I believe if it's factual. They did a quick survey. We got a break coming up in just a minute, and I do want to change gears. I really do. They did a survey of a lot of voters. There are a lot of people in the United States that are woefully uninformed between the terrible schooling they got in the public school system and the fact they watch the entertainment networks. They're clueless on anything in current events. They don't know anything. But a lot of them, when they were presented the facts on a few things, were asked a question. If you had known these facts before the election, would that have changed your vote? Yeah, a lot of them said yes. More than enough to change the election. And see, that's what Twitter and Facebook and YouTube have managed to do. They got themselves involved in the election here in the United States. They try to suppress any news about voter irregularities, try to pretend everything was fine. Don't look at the man behind the curtain. My wife and I happened to see The Wizard of Oz the other night. Don't look at the man behind the curtain. Everything was perfectly legit. And now we have a president-elect, so they claim. Honestly, I'm not buying it. I've seen too many things that don't look proper. Ballots arriving in the middle of the night, unidentified, and only voting for one candidate, nothing else on the ticket, nothing else on the ballot. That seems statistically impossible to have 100 and some odd thousand ballots show up for just one vote on it, just one, a whole box, nobody else. It's impossible. But then again, the mail-in voting was ripe for fraud. And those that made that prediction, like I did, sadly, we were proven right. This is Truth to Ponder. We'll take a break. and be right back.
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman. This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
And welcome back to part 2 of the program, Truth to Ponder. I'm your host, Bob Bierman. We're going to switch gears right now. This weekend marks the beginning of what is called the Advent season, as we set our sights on the first coming of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
Come, thou long expected Jesus, born to set thy people free. From our fears and sins release us, let us find our rest in thee. Strength and consolation, hope of all the earth thou art, the desire of every nation, joy of every longing heart. To deliver, born a child and yet a king, born to reign in us forever. Now thy gracious kingdom bring. By thine own eternal Spirit, rule in all our hearts alone. By thine all-sufficient merit, raise us to thy glorious throne. By thine all-sufficient merit, raise us to thy glorious throne.
And as I said, welcome back to the second half of the program, Truth to Ponder, formerly known as your weekend show in many areas. For the remainder of the program, I want to focus on this wonderful season of Advent that gets so overlooked. If you live in the Western world, you know that the stores have been putting out the Christmas stuff since over the years in particular. It seems like in September, you start seeing the Christmas and Halloween stuff all together. But we forget what Advent means and what it's all about. The word Advent comes from the Latin term Adventus, which means coming. It means coming. Many churches that use a church calendar, well, this is a period of preparation. In other words, we're supposed to understand the reason that Jesus came. For too many people today, Christmas has turned into a secular Santa Claus holiday. We have lost sight of the true meaning of Christmas. If you live in the United States, Canada, other parts of the world, you will know that companies like Hallmark have all these wonderful Christmas movies they put out. All heart-stirring, all, wonderful stories that are supposed to put a little tear in your eye about the magic of Christmas. I one time ran across this little thing called your own Hallmark holiday movie script generator. and I thought it rather funny. And so I want to just take a moment and have some fun for a few minutes. Look, the world is a difficult place, and sometimes we need a little bit of a break, a little bit of fun. And there are times we need to be serious about what Christmas is all about. We'll get there too. But this was kind of funny. It is called Create Your Own Hallmark Christmas Movie with this joyful story generator. And all you have to do is follow the script. So what you need is you've got to pick a number to fit each section. So the first thing in the format you need a female individual. And she's either sassy, clumsy, snarky, feisty, spirited, strong-willed. You choose one: nerdy, blundering, awkward, dedicated. In other words, you have to have a female in the lead, and her occupation is something like, she's a manager or a TV personality, reporter, an author, an artist, a dog watcher, fashion designer, decorator, librarian, party planner. You can just come up with all the journalist, an executive. That's what she does for a living. And she's unhappy because she was never given the credit for her ideas at work, or she got upset about a big promotion she'd been working for ages and didn't get it. She's overworked and missing out on her favorite time of the year. She lost her job and therefore her way in life. Or she had a tragic Christmas and now hates Christmas. You kind of follow. You just keep on plugging all these things in. And everything changes because she meets a blundering or snarky or nerdy or awkward or dorky or quiet or troublesome male who's a painter who doesn't realize his own talent, or a photographer covering the town's big Christmas parade, or a struggling writer responsible for the current situation in her life, or a friend she hasn't seen since childhood. And while they're at a big corporate event, or they're both involved in a funny mix-up at a coffee shop, or fighting over the same item at a department store, you see how these movies come together. And through all those circumstances, and with help from maybe a loving dog, a special child, the sister she never appreciated, a snarky elf assigned to her case by Santa himself, a department store Santa Claus, her old wise father, or something like that. And through it all, she discovers how meaningful life can be. Your first love isn't always the right love, or the true meaning of Christmas, or that success is only success if you're happy. There are a bunch of others. But you kind of understand, if you've ever watched a Hallmark movie, they all seem to fit in one of those genres. And at the end, everything works out perfectly and everybody lives happily ever after. But that's the problem. It's a Hallmark movie. And they're designed during this time of the year to, generally speaking, have happy endings. Let's look at the real Christmas. We have put so much into our holiday time, and I call it that because of all the trappings we seem to add. It was 1 year ago this weekend. 1 year ago. My wife and I had originally planned to be heading back to Florida, but we decided to stay just a little bit longer into January up here in the mountains. And so we decided to have for the future here a Christmas tree. So last year, my wife and I celebrated a very quiet Christmas here in our home in Georgia with our own little tree, and we decorated it and everything else and enjoyed our fireplace. And this place, this time of the year, gets a lot quieter because many people who live in Sky Valley also have a place in Florida. So more than half of our little town is gone. And so we get to enjoy the peace and the quiet, the mountains, the fireplace. And so in many ways, my wife and I last year had the storybook Christmas. I mean, it was just the two of us. We didn't have a whole lot of worry about dinners and people and travel. It was just the two of us. And we look forward to going back to Florida in the middle of January when it gets really cold up here. And I was going to be doing a lot of things all the way until well into the summer in Florida. Then we come back up to the mountains. Funny how things got completely changed on a dime. Isn't that amazing how completely things got changed on a dime? The coronavirus. Everything and all our plans for this year got completely put upside down. This season of Advent is a good time for us to look at ourselves. Why did Jesus have to come to this world? We just heard that wonderful Christmas song, or I should say Advent song or anthem or hymn, Come Thou Long Expected Jesus. One of my favorites for this time of the year, among many others. Little children are raised with different ideas about Christmas. A lot of parents still do the Santa Claus number, the tree and the gifts. And for too many kids, and I think for myself to a degree included, we looked at Christmas as a time of getting stuff. I'm going to show my age now. I can remember sometime toward the end of October, the Sears Christmas Wish Book came out. And my brother and I would just go through that book. We didn't look at the clothing. Oh, no. We don't look at that stuff. We didn't care yet about tools. But, man, we looked at the toys. I love model railroading. I liked, one of my favorites was, the car racing sets. There were a lot of things like that I liked. That's what boys liked back then. And my little sister, all the girl stuff, the Easy Bake Oven and all those kind of things. And you looked at this wonderful catalog of all these wonderful gifts. And I think for many children in too many households, that's all it is. It's a time of getting something for nothing. And we become expectant on what we should get. And if we don't get what we want, how many kids in this day and age, if they don't get exactly what they want, they're mad. They're upset. They feel abused. They feel like, you don't love me. You didn't give me what I wanted. That's the difference with Christmas. See, if we got what we deserved, not what we wanted, we would never have had Jesus come to this earth to die on behalf of us to take away our sin. One of the problems we have today in this world is we don't pay sin any heed any longer. We don't act like we need to be redeemed or to repent. The New World religion, and many churches in this country are going to become a part of it without even realizing it, all over the world. So-called Christian churches will become a part of this New World Church. And all it takes to become a part of the New World Church is to just get rid of and turn away from, rebuke and reject the most essential parts of the Christian faith and make them comply more to the world than to the creator of this earth. The social justice warrior church is not a church. There is no life in it. How do I say that? There is no life in that kind of a church. They're the churches that'll be accepted, like a state church in China. They never make waves or talk against the government there. They never try to proselytize. They never talk about sin like they should. Jesus only came to this earth to redeem us from our sin, to make us clean before an almighty God. And during these 4 weeks of Advent, we're supposed to focus. We're supposed to focus on what it's all about. In the Western churches, the Advent Sunday begins on the Sunday nearest to November 30th. And it's the beginning of a new church year. And that's what I was saying at the very beginning of the program. Time for a new beginning, to start over again. It's not just January 1st, but for Christians, it's really this first Sunday in Advent. The old church year is behind us. A new church year begins. Now, the date when this time of the year called Advent became part of Christian teaching and development, and let me explain something why the church calendar, I think, is relatively important. Every year it takes us through the life of Christ, from anticipating his coming, his earthly ministry, his ride into Jerusalem on the donkey, his crucifixion, his resurrection, and the early days of the church. We walk through it because back, 1,000 or more years ago, we didn't have books and DVDs and what have you. It was a tradition that we got to live each and every year. We figured it was around probably 3rd, 4th century at least. We know that it's mentioned a lot in those early days, in those first years of the church. The meaning of Advent, it's referred to a dual coming in many ways. We look not forward to just his first coming, but it reminds us to be prepared for his second coming. Remember, Jesus is coming again. And in the future programs, we're going to be talking more about his second coming. I sometimes wonder, I'm never one to say that it is or it isn't. But I look at what's happening in this world today. And what does the Bible say? It's in the days of Noah. Man, I look at this world that is so connected and so many things happening so rapidly. Things that 25 years ago you and I would never have believed possible, now just made normal. That's why when I get to this time of the year, while it reminds me of the many Christmases and great memories from my younger years, like singing in choirs and all the things that went with this time of the year with family and friends, it also reminds me that he is coming again. Are you ready for his coming again? One of my favorite hymns that just really cuts to the chase is probably one of the oldest Advent hymns ever written. It goes back to the very first centuries of the church. You and I know it as O Come, Emmanuel.
O come, Emmanuel, to free your captive Israel, that mourns in lonely exile here, until the Son of God appear. Rejoice, rejoice, O Israel, to you shall come
It is amazing how I remember that song so distinctly from my childhood. One of those first memories that you have is that haunting hymn, O come, Emmanuel. To this day, every time I hear it, I pause. I've heard it done on the organ. I've heard it done in so many different ways with choirs. I've heard it done solo. And I'm sure that I'll play it one or two more times before we get to Christmas, a couple of variations. It's a hymn that reminds us of the condition we find ourselves in. Let's go back to the time that Jesus came to his people Israel. God had made a promise all the way back in the very beginning that he would redeem his people, made a covenant with them, and he promised them a Messiah. They rejected that Messiah. And that's why we, as Gentiles, can be grafted onto that tree of life. But God is not a breaker of his promises. This is where some people and I have some disagreements. God made promises to his people. And I'm not into replacement theology. God made a promise and he's going to keep his promise, because if he doesn't keep his promise, then he's not God. He can't be trusted. God would never break his promise to you. He promises to never leave us nor forsake us. We go through difficult times, but in the end, he's always there for us. Look, the early church understood the idea of being a witness, which is where we get the word martyr. How many times has my friend Dr. Timothy Gales reminded us that even those early Christians that were rounded up, taken to Rome, and put in the Colosseum, they didn't fear for their lives when the lions were released. They praised God. They sang. And they looked forward to being with their Savior. And this confounded the people of the day. We are to be a witness. We're going to some very difficult times. The Jewish people at that time were under the captivity of Rome. They had lost their land and their freedom. Today, in this world, Satan is fighting extremely hard. He wants to deceive you and steal your children. What does the Bible say about Satan? He's there to kill and to steal and to destroy. And he's now using governments to do it. We willingly give up our freedoms. We willingly walk away from our faith, all for expediency. During this Advent season, we'll talk about those kinds of tribulations and things that are happening, and I believe it brings us potentially closer to our Lord's second coming. I want to thank those that have helped this program financially in recent weeks. It means a lot to be able to cover that big air bill that I have in terms of airtime on shortwave in the United States. I'm thankful for those that listen and write. If you'd like to write the program, you can use our mailing address in Georgia, and that is Truth to Ponder, or my name, Bob Biermann. That's the German spelling, B-I-E-R-M-A-N-N. That's B-I-E-R-M-A-N-N. And our home address in Georgia is 21 Berkshire Lane, B-E-R-K-S-H-I-R-E Lane, number 263. That's our little P.O. box we need to have on there. Number 263 in the city of Sky Valley, 2 words, Sky Valley, Georgia, and the zip code 30537. I want to thank those that make this program possible each and every day in many areas and each weekend as well. Until the next time we get together on this program, may God richly bless you and your family.
This has been Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman. To find out more, visit our website, truth2ponder.com. That's truth2ponder.com. Truth to Ponder, shining the light of truth in a darkening world.